Welcome into this Five Clubs conversation. I'm Gary Williams. The gentleman I'm getting ready to interview or have a conversation with is the CEO of the PGA of America. And if you told me he was going to do this job 5, 6, 8 years ago, I would have said, why? But I know why now, and I kind of knew why then, because he's so intellectually and emotionally invested in the game of golf. But his position is very, very significant because right now the synergy that exists between the USGA, the R&A, the PGA Tour, Augusta National, and the PGA of America has never been better. And that's really important considering all the issues facing the game in a collective. Start with the Saudi Golf Initiative. And then if you want to go to what might come down with respect to the Distance Insights report put out by the R&A and the USGA and how much they need to work together on these issues because we know we live in a very litigious society. Well, Seth Waugh has an interesting background, a background that has seen a great deal of success. He's somebody who genuinely loves the game of golf. His championship is coming up in a couple of weeks, the PGA Championship at Southern Hills. Plenty to discuss with the CEO of the PGA of America. And with that, we welcome in Seth Waugh. My friend, how are you?
Couldn't be better, Gary. Nice to be with you. How you doing? I'm doing a whole new life.
Well, it's great. It really is. It's you know what? Beyond this, it's nice to be in Charlotte. It's nice to be around a lot of family, a lot of friends, some people that you know well. But you know what? This I love because I get to, nobody's saying, "Hey, we got to go to break," which is nice. Get those talking points in. Hit that break now.
There you go. It's one of the advantages of being a CEO. Nobody ever cuts you off, right?
Exactly. Now, of course, one of my business partners is sitting over here going, "No, actually, I can cut you off." But nonetheless, no, it's good to see you. I'm going to get to why you've got that wide smile on your face because for people who don't know, your love affair with golf is not because you happen to have the position you have. This is a deep-seated thing with you that's very personal. It's very much about family. It's about fellowship. But I want you to explain to everybody where it started. I mean, you have a big family. You got a lot of brothers. Your dad was in the academic world. Where did your curiosity and then ultimately your passion about the game of golf, where did it come from?
Yeah, it's a long, if you want a long answer, I got one, I guess. It really, my father was a teacher and a coach, coached baseball, basketball, and played them both. And I had the great fortune of both having him in class, 6 or 7 times and playing for him on 7 or 8 teams and being his captain. But anyway, we grew up playing everything. And through school, I played 3 sports because that's kind of what you did. And golf was always a little bit in there in the sense that the school that he taught at had a little 9-holer. And before I could kind of work in the summers, I'd get dropped off at campus with a tennis racket and a bag of raggedy clubs. And we'd play 9 holes in our bare feet after playing tennis and hoops and jumping in the pond and doing all the stuff that kids do, right? And we used to fool around in the backyard. We had a thing called wiffle golf where we'd put, we'd use a Frisbee as the hole and we'd play around different things, and have played in a lot of my brothers and I and my father played in a lot of obscure places, including the Aran Islands and getting a lot of stairs. So anyway, it sort of started there. And then once I graduated from school, I had a number of injuries, blew out my knees, tried to play over 30 baseball, blew out my shoulder, at which point the only thing I could really compete in, frankly, was golf. And I got okay. I was a decent athlete. I'd never had a lesson. Got invited to play at a member guest with like my best friend. It was West Hampton Country Club. And I actually birdied the 18th hole, the 3rd match to get to extra holes. And all of a sudden now you got 50 people kind of watching you because, they had nothing better to do. And then, first hole we kind of survived, but my wheels are totally rattling. second hole, and my partner's parred them both. And we get to the third hole, and he misses the green. It's par 3. The other two guys knocking on the green, and he goes, "Hey, partner, I need you." Now there's 75 people watching, and I cold shanked a 5-iron into the woods. So I kind of go like, that is the worst feeling I've ever had athletically in my life. I went back, we were renting a house on the beach. I took every ball I could find out of my bag, and I hit it into the ocean with my 5-iron just to sort of make sure I could do it. And I decided that night that I had to get better. And I was blind to a little local place in Long Island, and I went to Eddie Kelly, who was the local pro, and said, "Eddie, I can't do this anymore." And he just on sort of watching Arnold on TV kind of thing, and he rebuilt my swing a little bit, and I got down to the point where I was, pretty low single digit at one point. But what really changed it, Gary, and I think this is where you're going, is our oldest son was born, and he just found the game. We lived on the back of a golf course in the 4th hole, and I'd kind of go out at 5 o'clock at night and hit balls. And from age 2, he could hit it. He's a lefty, and he'd just get out there and whack it. And then, by the time he was 3 or 4, I just made up a little hole where we'd, play 4 holes, and had Clancy tees that were, 100 yards out or whatever. And that was our deal. We'd do this loop, and he played every sport, but every Sunday was golf day in the afternoon, and we'd go play 9 or 18 or 36, whatever he wanted to do. And he got obsessed with it, which we all do. And he broke 100 when he was 5 from the red tees, which is, sort of mind boggling still, and started to compete. And I started caddying for him. And all of a sudden golf wasn't something that took me away from my family, but it brought me to my family. Right. And now we have 5 kids. We have family scrambles on every holiday. Everybody, the girls are getting into it. Our next oldest son ran track, and now is totally obsessed with it. The girls are all into it because they're, either dating or interested in guys that play, and including one of Clancy's ex-teammates. And so it's, it brings us together. The real obsession is that, I think golf might be the greatest engine for good on earth, right? You think about the charitable dollars, you think about how every other sport needs to use our sport to raise money, to bring people together. It's kind of every athlete's second sport now, right? But more importantly, the places it brings you to, the people you meet, the relationships that you have, the lessons that you learn, the time with your family, the values that it represents. And the time that you can spend doing it and obsessing on it, right? It's an amazing drug, right? When you're not playing well, you can't sleep at night, right? And when you are, that's how you go to bed, is thinking about that 7-iron you hit that day. So it's, it sort of came to me more than I came to it. Got interwoven in my business career in a number of different ways, which I won't bore everybody with, but, and then all of a sudden I found myself in the business, which is, wasn't a plan. It just kind of happened. And it's a privilege to be in my seat. That's for sure.
When you took this job, I don't think it shocked a ton of people, because your name had been kicked around a lot with respect to the PGA Tour, with your involvement in the advancement and the elevation of the Deutsche Bank Championship, your relationships in the game. But it still surprised some that you became the CEO of the PGA of America. And I knew you had specific objectives. You have great relationships with a lot of PGA professionals. I know how much you admire the work that they do. Where are you on those objectives?
That's a great question. I said earlier, my father and mother were both teachers, and so I always thought that's what I would do, right? And then I sort of found out, I sort of accidentally went to Wall Street and spent, a career there, and loved it. No excuses. But this to me is a little bit back to the future, right? I never will have the chance to impact more lives, right? If we can make 28,000 lives better, we can make millions of lives better through this game, as we talked about. And so it's a gift to me, right, that I get this opportunity to do that. I think, I think my broad goals were to kind of see where the puck is going rather than where it's been. I think, we've spent a lot of time as an industry kind of protecting our grandparents' game, if you will, as opposed to making the game for our kids. And so sort of realizing that disruption was going to come, And, we had to be a part of that and embrace it in order to grow the game and have it, when I first came on, it was like, the narrative was, is golf going to be okay? Right. And now we're obviously this incredible boom, but it was like, what do we do to sort of save the game as opposed to, how do we deal with this growth, the hockey stick? So that's one thing. And so mission accomplished, I think COVID obviously has helped a lot, but a lot of that's been intentional, right? Like we've embraced the game in every form, right? Like golf, Top Golf is not the enemy. It's our partner, maybe our most important partner. It's a gateway to our game. It's not, so when I started, they had really basically 0 PGA professionals in their stores. They now have at least one in every one. Because they're giving lessons and promoting the game. Look what's going on in 9-holers and Himalaya putting experiences and Pop Golf and all this stuff that's going on, which is fantastic, right? And I've always said, like, if you shoot hoops in your backyard, you play basketball that day. It wasn't 5-on-5 with, refs, but so it doesn't have to be 18 holes, with everything in the hole. It can be putting on your carpet, and that's sort of golf. So I think that's great. And now we got to make sure that's sustainable and sticky. I think the other thing that I, really wanted to focus on is I thought the industry was, the industry is ridiculously bifurcated, right? There's way too many kind of agencies. You get the USGA. I'm not picking on anybody. It's just the way it is, sure. Right? Like a PGA Tour, the European Tour, the LPGA, the USGA, the RNA, PGA of America. Like nobody, half the people I know think I have Jay's job, right? And I don't always, sort of tell them that that's not the case. But when I got into the room, I think, the perception was that we were competitors, that we were somehow, battling for space. And like, I just kind of, it was over the rules thing at first, and then obviously the schedule and everything else we've done. And it was like, but guys, I'm not your competitor. You're my biggest partner. Jay, I borrow your players a couple times a year. And Molly, I borrow your players once or twice a year. Like that, we need to be the board of directors of the game, right? And of kind of Golf Inc. And like, how do we promote it together? We can do so much more together than we can apart. And I think, that the scheduling and how Jay handled all that was, a big part of that. How we've dealt with Make Golf Your Thing, which I'll talk about in a second, which is kind of our industry efforts to grow the game and diversify the game. So I'm proud of that. Another big goal I had, obviously is, in general, as I said, impacting lives. So trying to make 28,000 lives better, and realize that the two biggest things that faced them when I started anyway was, sort of a healthcare system, yep. Which, some clubs have or some facilities have, not everybody does, making something portable. And the second was, some safety net, right? Some ability to accumulate wealth. And we're still working, frankly, on the healthcare side. It's a very complicated issue. It's what Obamacare has tried to be and has failed in certain ways and succeeded in others. And you just can't create a national class because of the state-by-state regulations. But we're going to improve that, but I don't feel like we have a silver bullet for that yet. But on the safety net side, I'm really proud to say that we got approved last year a deferred compensation plan, which I think is going to, we believe, and is going to be game changing for our 28,000, right? You're going to have the ability to earn money and pension points, which will then be managed. It'll be managed through outside sources, but you'll be able to self-direct those. And over, a 40-year career for, you, when you started out as a apprentice, you would be able to participate in that. And over 40 years, the compounding effect at whatever, 5 to 8% is very powerful. So, when you retire, now you'd have a nest egg of whatever, call it $500,000 to $1.5 million, depending on how much you put in there over your life. So really excited about that, proud of that one. They hadn't been able to figure that out for 100 years or so. And so I'm really proud of our team and what we put together there. So Look, the good news is, it's an endless job, right? Because you're trying to grow the game every day in every way. And you're trying to, sort of serve the members every day. So the last thing I talk about is, again, I referenced it, but is make golf your thing. And, we realized as COVID, was starting, it was sort of June of 2020, and Jay had gotten us back on the field, and things are starting to crank up. And we had done a thing called Back to Golf, which, I woke up one morning and saying, like, look, what am I facing? And I'm sitting in my bedroom, not allowed to go out. I wasn't allowed to, we live across the street from the beach. I wasn't allowed to go in the ocean. I wasn't allowed to play golf. I wasn't allowed to play tennis. I wasn't, really wasn't allowed to like walk around the neighborhood. And I sort of said, like, this is crazy. Like, we actually people need an outlet, right? Like, and so golf can be a part of that, solution as opposed to the problem, right? And at its core, if you and I walked, 18 holes with a bag over our back on 200 acres, like, that's pretty safe, right? Like, that's a walk in the park and what we should be doing. And so I used a couple of connections to get to Dr. Fauci and just said, look, we think golf can be exactly what the society needs. We need mental and physical release here. And we have all this acreage that's out there being, unused. And it was somewhat selfish because we wanted to, obviously our facilities wanted to be open and making money. That, was at that point, everybody was afraid of a recession because of, lack of activity. And, but it was also, societally, I think something that we needed to do. And I said, we can have sort of safe sex for golf, right? Like, and that is, let's start with, no contact and meet in the parking lot and, no carts and no F&B and whatever, and we'll layer it on. So we started this 3-stage of thing, which we then rolled out to the industry and rolled out across the board. So now golf is booming. I'm not trying to take all credit for that. We put our thumb on the scale, and our, 28,000 were the workers out there that, frontline workers that were making that happen. And so now we're booming. And then George Floyd happens, right? Which is obviously an incredible tragedy, but created this moment, which, we all want to be a movement, right? Of social justice. And how do we respond to this in the right way? And it struck me again that, one of the things that has frustrated me through my entire career is that I haven't been able to move the needle, frankly enough, on inclusion, whether that was on Wall Street and, there's golf's got a lot to be proud of, but its history on this front is not something, right? We had a Caucasian only clause till 1961. Well, Jackie Robinson came on in 1947, right? So we've got, work to do on making the game look more like the rest of the world. So maybe the world will behave a little bit more like our game, right? And so I called Jay and I called Mike Wan, who was running the LPGA at the time, and I said, look, we have an obligation and an opportunity to do two things. One is to grow the game generationally. Let's pretend that Tiger burst on the scene, again, and what would we do differently this time that we didn't do last time to make it sticky, to make it generational, so people didn't buy clubs and stick them in the closet. And so that's number one. And number two is, again, how do we make the game look more like the rest of the world in this moment/movement? And so I said, what do you want? We totally agree. What do you want to do? So I said, well, we have a convening power. We called a call with all the CEOs of the equipment companies, Top Golf, kind of everybody, the management companies in golf, and invited them all to be on a call. Everybody was in violent agreement on these two things. So from that, we now have a group of 120 or so people from that industry that are volunteering their time to be a part of 6 working groups, which are, supply chain, employment, grassroots, charitable giving, which we're giving away. We've collected, we've sort of aggregated our pool of charitable dollars, and we now have a system of application and doing it. So we're writing bigger checks to more places of 750,000, which the industry is giving away every year. We have a marketing campaign. We have, all these sort of things going on. And so I for the first time ever, the industry, despite it being so bifurcated, is actually working together to do exactly what we should do, which is grow the game and make it, make it, not only welcoming, but invitational. Right. And so I'm proud of all those things. And, look, as I said, the work will never stop. And that's kind of the good news. I think the unintended consequence, frankly, of all this growth and all the activity in golf is that our people are tired. Those frontline workers have been going 24/7. We've upped, we're up 30-40% in terms of volume. And we haven't added to the employment pool, right? And we're not really paying them more money. And so the big work this year is going to be to how do we create more supply. We had a demand problem, we've got a supply problem of labor now. Now it's obviously a problem across the whole economy, but within ours, how do we attract young people? How do we keep them in the business? And how do we give them a life, right? Because they're working for very low rate wages and very, very long hours. And so we've got this whole work-life balance and compensation thing is something we're going to work on, hard over the next year or two.
You mentioned some of the principles, and I'll go through them again. Martin Slumbers of the R&A, Mike Waugh now, formerly of the LPGA, now with the USGA, Molly, who's with the LPGA now, yourself, Jay, Fred Ridley of Augusta National. I always thought that it was too territorial. And there wasn't enough of a collective cause. And I get it. Look, you have to worry about your own constituents, but I think now there is a better working relationship. And these are really personal, great relationships that I think exist at a time when a lot of things have to be done with everybody's interests at heart. And that includes the distance issue that the USGA and the R&A had to kind of shelve that thing because of COVID. Now it's back out there. And where is the resolution? Mike Waugh told me on this show, he said, look, we've had cosmetic bifurcation for a long time now. Where are we going with this?
Right. So the first point I'll say is, the relationships are real and they're more and more deep seated. I've been lucky enough to know all these people, with the exception of Mike, for years. Jay was my tournament director in Boston. I've played with Fred the first time at the AT&T in 1990 something, and Martin and I worked together for a dozen years or so at Deutsche Bank, and Mike Davis is somebody I've known for 25 years. So those relationships are real. We always have gotten together around the majors, but it's more sort of for board meetings and not really conversation. And we're now getting together. Kind of in offsites to talk about all the big issues that are facing us. And I think it's really healthy, really good. And that will continue. So that's all very real. I think, this is on the one hand, my hesitation is I don't want to tell my friends okay, we've got this huge boom going on. And I think, frankly, one of the mistakes that the game has made when I talked about it protecting its grandparents' game is for 25 or 30 years, architecture was judged by, how hard a golf course was, as opposed to how fun it was, or how, interesting it was, or how beautiful it was. To that point, I just don't want to say, okay, we've got this giant boom going on. We've getting, we got 600,000 new juniors. We've got, the game of just, it's getting younger, right?
Yep.
The 20 somethings that we couldn't attract are now obsessed and all about it. And I don't want to say that to them or my friends, frankly, that hey, I know you fell in love with the game. Now we're going to make it harder again, right? We're going to look like a bunch of, fat, white, rich guys saying, the fun police, right? And so making sure that we don't do that willy-nilly. I get that we're trying to, figure it out for the top, 1% or 1% of 1%, for sure, right? But and I also think part of the entertainment of this has been, frankly, the amazing things that they're doing. That that Bryson can drive the first hole of the Ryder Cup and take his putter out. That's pretty cool, right? And I think that's part of the reason people are watching it. So I think I get that we're worried about the future. I know we will have balance on it. I started with the first part of your point because I think it's important that this will be a real conversation this time. It's not going to get jammed down anybody's throat. We're going to all have a conversation. We may not all totally agree, but we'll come out of the room, sort of saying the same thing because we have to, right? We have to. We're the stewards of the game, and we have to do that. I think bifurcation is a slippery slope, and I get the whole wooden bat thing. But at the end of the day, one of the beauties of this game is that in a pro-am, you can go into the same arena with the same equipment and measure yourself against the best person on earth, right? And that's pretty cool, right? Like it's and so tee boxes are sort of have been the bifurcation, right? And I'm okay with that. So I hope they can develop balls that can be more affected at higher swing speeds than they are low swing speeds, right? So if you can figure out the physics of a 120 mile an hour swing speed, your 7-iron is going to go, whatever it's not just on a percentage basis, but on a real basis, because the ball doesn't get as compressed, that it affects us a lot less than it affects them. Now it will because of the power of, compounding, but I think that's where I'd rather see it go. I'd almost rather see spin go into a ball than distance, right? And adding skill back to the game, I think, or creativity back to the game, I think is a really interesting thought too. So a lot more to happen. We all understand, the emotion around it. We all understand the debate around it. And I know we'll come to a good conclusion because I know we'll come out of the room together. The white smoke will go up and we'll figure it out.
Your championship, your members championship is in a couple weeks. At Southern Hills. I know you're excited for the world to see that place again, what Gil Hanse and his team and Jim Wagner have done there. It's fabulous. But with that makes me think about all these future sites. And look, you guys have a lot of places that are already online, and the USGA is doing a lot of that as well. Why is this happening? Why is this race to commitments that are like 20, 25, 30 years out there? Why is this happening, do you think?
I think it's happening because because it's fun. I think, it's happening for different reasons in different places. I actually think it's kind of wrong, to be honest with you. And I don't mean to criticize the USGA. I like, the idea of a road hip makes sense to me. I think they've, they kind of experimented with taking it to other places and new places and whatever. And I think they've gone back to the future a little bit, like the British Open. And I actually agree with that. I think that's a good thing to do. I think it's frankly, when you say 20 to 25 years, I think it's a little bit possibly irresponsible, right? Because who knows what's gonna happen between then and now, and you certainly don't need that much time to lock something in. When we made a decision to move to Southern Hills, a year and a half ago, we had 30 plus venues that were willing to take us on, world-class places. Like, I wouldn't say all of them could have handled it, but almost all of them. And that was an 18-month window, right? And so, we're committed long out before I got here, and I'm not criticizing any predecessors. I think there's been this back to the competition thing. It was sort of, okay, well, you had to lock it in. We had to lock it in before the USGA did, and the USGA had to lock it in before we did. And, it was sort of a little bit of a game on that front but there are so many wonderful places that are dying for something. And I've never looked at it as like a USGA versus a PGA facility. I just think it should fit into like whatever the calendar is. They're all championship golf courses, and we're all for the game. And I don't want to compete on that front. It doesn't make any sense. So I'm all over the place a little bit. What I'm saying is, is I probably wouldn't have committed us out as far as we're committed out. Let's start with that, because I think life can change too much. But having said that, I understand what the USGA is doing and Mike is doing in the sense of this ROTA, and just kind of making a forward commitment to those clubs that, are you going to invest over the next 2 or 3 decades to make sure that whatever happens as the game modernizes, that you're going to invest in, us and the ability to have a championship. And this will give them comfort to do that, and some certainty to the public about, what are the US Open golf courses. And I think there's an element of really cool stuff to that, whether that's supposed to be 25 years or 15 years, I don't know. But anyway, that's kind of where I am.
Do you, when you look at your future sites, look, to whatever degree we're going to hold our breath next year, and hopefully Rochester, it's
It'll
mild.
Be a test.
It will be. It will be. I thought Bethpage was great. I mean, I thought the temperatures were fabulous. Tulsa in May as opposed to August is going to be delightful. But does this look? You've got your facility in Frisco that's going to be a big part of the future of your championship. Does it realistically open up other areas of the country, whether it be Southwest or even the state of Florida for that matter?
Yeah, I think it opens up more than it closes. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
And that was part of the calculus. I'd also say, in talking to the players, and if you wouldn't remember, but I do, because I was, jumpy about it at the time, was at Bethpage, the beginning of part of that week was awful. Like, it rained, it was cold, it was awful. And, we had the Champions Dinner on the Tuesday night, and I sat next to Tiger and Rory, and I was saying, how are we doing out there? And they go, look, no matter what it looks like the rest of the week, and by the way, it ended up being perfect, this is still better than August. Because August in, Bethpage, it was thunderstorms and slog and humidity and heat, and, obviously Southern Hills is a torture test in August in a lot of ways, right? So even the places that are sketchy, I think they'll be happier to be at Oak Hill in May, even if it's a little bit rough, than they would be in August. So that's all sort of good news. The agronomy is so good now that the courses are going to be fine, and then it just becomes what's going on that week. So, and look, as I said, there's a ROTA obviously now for the US Open. We have 41 sections. We, theoretically want to bring our championship to everyone, right? Like, we want to bring the game to the people. That's kind of one of our major pillars, right? Or our pillar. And so we're going to continue to look at, places around the country that, can host it. It may take out a place like Whistling Straits, unfortunately, which has been a great site for us, but as you say, it adds Florida, it adds Texas, it adds, lots of places that you really couldn't have imagined in August. So we're excited about it.
As you should be. The last year, look, you had one of the great stories in major championship history, and nobody in the world could have imagined that your defending champion is currently in a appointed exile. Do you have any indication one way or the other whether Phil Mickelson is going to be there?
Yeah, look, I think the whole thing's just sad, right? It's sad for Phil, and it's sad for the game, and he's been great for the game for a really long time. And I do believe in redemption, and I do believe that he can figure this out. I think he's got to decide what he wants to be. Does he want to be part of the ecosystem or change the ecosystem? And I think he's kind of caught in between a little bit right now. I've had a number of conversations with him before, call it last fall, and since then, and recently. I think he is, as you said it well. I think he's trying to figure out when the right time for him is. I think the game's trying to figure out the right time for him too. How long is long enough, and is he ready mentally and physically to do it? And so he signed up, a long time ago, as he has to. I mean, obviously he's exempt as our defending champion, but he signed up and has stayed signed up in order to sort of keep his options open. I think it'll be a late decision. And I think, we'll continue to have conversations. I've known Phil for 20 something years, and he's a complicated guy with complicated thoughts and in a complicated situation. And so we're all trying to figure out what's best for him and frankly, what's best for the game. And we're going to keep having those conversations.
Does your team have some procedures in place, let's say in the event that he does play, as far as, him meeting the media? This is going to be, it would be an extraordinary event. The interest is going to bleed beyond the sports section. We're talking about, he's a cultural figure. Do you guys have some things in place in the event that he chooses to come?
Yeah, we've talked about it a lot. And, I hope what we can do is have that before, the flag goes up, right? So the idea is, if he does play and if he's able to and allowed to, if he will play, he'd certainly have to face the media, but I hope it's, Monday or Tuesday. And then we can, once the flag goes up, it's about the golf, right? And that's, what we're trying to do is deliver a major championship, not a circus, right? And so I would hope that he can avoid that, and everybody can avoid that. And we're talking about, golf shots instead of verbal gaffes, right? Once we get going. But there's certainly, I think part of his thinking is, am I ready to face that glare and have that conversation and have all the answers that everybody's going to be looking for? And if I do it that week, am I then able to compete, on a major championship venue under that kind of pressure, right? With everything going on. So, but we would do everything we could to make it happen, either before our week or very early in the week.
Let's take him out of this, but just in general, if players make a decision to play this LIV Golf series, and let's say the decision is made by the PGA Tour that they're not going to be members of the PGA Tour anymore, ostensibly they wouldn't necessarily be members of the PGA of America as well, and that could compromise Ryder Cup participation. Is that something that they're jeopardizing as well?
Absolutely. So you got to make a distinction because it's confusing, right? Like a lot of things in golf, that the series is a series, the league is a league, right? And to play in an individual event, and as a number of them have already done, including Phil, have applied for a release to play in it, and that's perfectly okay to apply for that release, and it's not on U.S. soil, and that all makes sense. I think once they begin to play on U.S. soil, that changes things potentially, because they don't allow you to play on a competing U.S. event during a U.S. event. You have to protect the sponsors of the game, et cetera, et cetera. So that's if the league in fact comes and people sign up for it. I think that's a very different thing than playing in the Harold Varner winning in Saudi and potentially playing in this UK event. And so that would absolutely remain to be seen and how that ecosystem changes. But let me go back to sort of a fundamental point. I actually think, and I was very vocal about this last spring when asked at our championship, I think this is a flawed structure. And I think it's flawed on a number of levels. So, first of all, I'm not sure team play is anything that people really care about. Obviously in Ryder Cup they do. I'm not sure that, ownership of these teams, other than the benefit to the players, which is significant potentially, is anything that the fans really care about, et cetera, et cetera. I also think that if money is introduced to this, like at the end of the day, the game is owned by its members, right? So the tour players own the tour. My 28,000 own our association. I work for them. I'm their fiduciary, right? I have a perpetual institution that like a university, that I need to leave better than I found it, right? And if you suddenly put equity into that, where somebody needs to get a return, somebody needs to get an exit, and somebody's going to have a lot of votes, all of a sudden that hugely changes the dynamics of how things work, right? And I think it's a slippery, dangerous slope. I mean, it's why the tour broke off in the first place. Is that Arnold and Jack, and rightfully so, believed that the players should own the tour, and they do. And so, and look, I have lived in a world of disruption. I embrace it. You have to, or you're going to get run over by it. We're an $85 billion industry. We're cool for the first time ever. Like, people are coming at us, right? And that's good. And we just have to react to it. And what Jay has done to put 150 million or so more into the purses, right? And obviously there's going to be an escalation, and already has been, at the Masters in the majors purses, because it is, a bit of an arms race, and the player impact program, like everything that's happened here, the sort of, affiliation going towards a much closer affiliation with the European tour, that's all a result of all this, disruption from the outside. The question is, do you need outside money to make the game better, or somehow, better for the players, better for the fans, better for all the stakeholders? And I just don't believe that you do. And then you got to consider the source of the money as well, right? Which is, also hugely important in every investment decision, like where it comes from. Money, all money is not created equal, right? And so that's, another thing. So, like, I just think, it's flawed. I really do. And, obviously that's self-serving because it protects our ecosystem. But as an outside observer, I really believe that. And so I don't think it's in the best interest of the game. And if it gets going, I think it hurts the game, doesn't help the game. Like, why would you want to have competing leagues when the whole game is finally coming together? We finally, we're kind of at that world tour that, Greg wanted so badly. And I think he's kind of right about, in the form of, the tours kind of coming together. So I think it's all happening. It's just happening internally as opposed to externally. And that's a good thing.
Quickly, one other thing about Southern Hills. Tiger was there last week. Have you gotten any indication since he's been there from his team about impression and also him where he is physically?
I think it'll be, as he said, at the Masters, game time. I think he wants to play. He's had great success there. I talked to him after he saw it. The greens were sanded, so it was a little hard to tell, on the green speeds and everything else. But he was really impressed. Said it's longer, it's harder. That may have been something to do with the weather. It's not a easy walk because, as it's it's called Southern Hills, right? but it's not Augusta either in terms of how hard that is. I think everybody knows this. I think Augusta took more out of him than he even thought it would. And he's an amazing, he's got an amazing will as well as his his athletic ability. And so I think he absolutely wants to play. I know he was hurting more on sort of Monday than he thought he would be, but he recovered quickly and was kind of getting back at it Tuesday, Wednesday. So after Augusta, and so I'm hopeful, I guess is what I'm saying. And I don't have any inside information. I just I know he thinks a lot of our championship. He and I are pretty good friends, and I don't mean he's going to play for me, but I know he wants to try to play. Let's put it that way.
A couple of things before
I don't think he would have. He wouldn't have thought that in January, even February. I don't think. But.
A couple other things. Let me get you out of here. The USA Golf. I thought you should have been running USA Golf about 8 years ago. I think we now have almost inform USA Golf. I think the President's Cup and the Ryder Cup, in terms of the pool of players, in terms of the men who were investing in the captaincy, as far as being assistant captains, not being disqualified for one because you're associated with the other, is best for USA Golf. I also think the USGA is getting ready to invest in the grassroots level. Are we almost there? Are we almost at where we have USA Golf?
Yeah, and it's back to what we talked about before, which are these relationships, right?
Yeah.
And, like I've never viewed any client or any shareholder, or anybody as anything other than a partner. And so that's just kind of how I look at life. Like, you're my partner, Jane's my partner. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't. I think we're going to do it in that way. And because of those relationships, Jay and I have talked about not only, not disqualifying somebody for being Ryder Cup or President's Cup captain, but actually using each one of those to train, right? So, like, if maybe you shouldn't be a, Ryder Cup captain until you've captained the President's Cup. I'm making that up. Don't, whatever. But that sort of the way to think about it is to do it that way. And Mike is very keen on doing this sort of, USA grass, sort of junior,
almost like a federation.
And we've talked about it forever too. And so if that happens, it'll happen again. It'll happen together. It's kind of my coaches, some of his money, and we don't know where the facilities might be, but shared resources. Like, we can just do so much more together than we can apart. So, like, I think if this was a business, Gary, and by this I mean golf, it would have gotten rolled up a long time ago, because it just doesn't make any sense. It's so inefficient in terms of how it does. But that doesn't mean we can't make it work really, really well, which is what we've done. You look at what happened through COVID. The industry is one of the huge winners, and that was leadership as much as luck, right? And Jay's willing. Jay in May was talking about going back on the field when everybody was hiding underneath their beds, right? And so, amazing, right? And the fact that we were first on television, first back on the field. Our major at Harding Park was the first event that mattered in sports since the Super Bowl. Was a great thing for our game, and then obviously on the participation side. So it's been a great run for the game. We're not taking it for granted by any means. We need to make sure we keep it sticky and generational, and we're doing everything we can possibly do to make that the case. The other good news about our ecosystem, back to USA Golf kind of question, is we do have the best system in the world in the sense of our college system, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we have minor league baseball without it, and you're getting 4 years of education, right? And those guys are coming out, and Jay's idea of having them get some status as a result of their play in the college game is fantastic. And it's a much healthier system, because you come out and somebody who hurts their back and is a can't miss, and has been doing it since they were 15 and doesn't have an education. They're looking at less of a life than somebody that graduates from Vanderbilt and suddenly can't play for whatever reason. That part of it's terrific. We just need to sort of marry the pieces a little bit better than we have.
All right, 5 quick questions to get you out of here. Let me qualify the first one by saying this gentleman just came back from caddying for his son in the final stage of the Sunshine Tour. He got through despite the input he was getting from his looper.
That's very true.
The place you want to take your son Clancy to play golf that neither one of you have ever been to?
Sand Hills.
Very good answer. Very good answer.
Never been.
It's Mecca. And I've encouraged you to go.
Number two would be Crystal Downs, which I also have a curiosity.
That's now because I've gotten to Sand Hills. That's number one. I'll tell you another one that's north of Sand Hills, Gill's new place, Cap Rock Ranch, looks special.
I've seen pictures from him. I have not been there obviously yet, but it looks really cool.
All right. The best golf book you've ever read?
To the Linksland.
Very
Michael
good one.
Yeah.
All right. The most competitive person you've ever played golf with?
Tiger Woods.
That's an unbeatable answer. All right. Your favorite view in the world of golf?
17th hole at Cypress.
A very, very nice plaque right there to denote that very specific place.
Yeah. Number 2 is 17 at National, which I think is also, as you know, I have this. I have a my rating system on golf is very different than everybody else's. Mine is what is it on the happy scale, not what is it on the challenge scale. And those are two very happy places.
Very much so. The last one, and the most important one, that you be honest. The last time you had a lower score than your wife Jane in a round you played together.
That's an excellent question. At the risk. So I'm going to answer that I'm going to deflect. We won the husband-wife at Seminole this year, which is alternate shot, by the way. So that's my answer.
And you didn't immediately go into proceedings, which I'm sure a few other participants might have.
No, we're pretty good at it, but I made a couple putts and helped her out a little bit, and she hits the ball so well. She's starting to putt well, which just means she's gonna start killing me. I actually probably beat her on most days, mostly because she just doesn't know how good she is, and she won the senior Shinnecock Club Championship last summer, and she's gotten the competitive bug, and so she's so good. She's gonna absolutely dust me. But so far, I'm hanging on for bare life. It was sort of when Clancy turned 11, and he then hit it further. Hit better irons, was a better chipper, and beat me from the same tees every time. So it's coming. Well, I was my father's son, and then I was my son's father, and now I'm my wife's husband.
Well, yeah, you had paint on the wall at Seminole already for the pro member, but now you've got it for a more important reason with you and Jane, which is great. Listen, your time is precious and it's valuable, and I appreciate it very much. I'm looking forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks. Thank you for taking the time.
Well, your friendship is precious and valuable, and it's one of the great gifts of my life. So it's great to see you doing so well. I'm glad you've got your new life, and I'm proud of you. So it's great to be with you, and good luck. And I can't wait to see you in a couple of weeks for a hug.
Thank you.
All the best, all right?
Really appreciate Seth Waugh, the PGA of America, taking the time. I thought it was interesting, obviously, what he said. We're going to wait for a decision from Phil Mickelson on not only the immediate future, but the long-term future. And it's not just him. He said it very clearly that these other players, there will be consequences. Go out, it's a free market, but the decisions that are made regarding where you're going to play may impact where you may not play. And that may include future Ryder Cups with respect to some of these American and also European players as well. So I appreciate him taking the time, appreciate all of you taking the time to listen and to watch. Next week, Shane Ryan, great writer, just wrote a book about the last Ryder Cup, which is a great history book as well. He's going to join us. And if you watch live from, whether it's the Masters, the US Open, and the next one will be the PGA, Rich Lerner is the man who runs that show. But the guy behind it, and has been for 20 years, Matt Hegarty, the senior coordinating producer, live from, the history of live from on Golf Channel. Those two gentlemen are going to join me as well. Have a great day, everybody.